Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time on this Wednesday night, March the 5th. We're happy to have you guys in for another episode of the Primetime program. Titans are trying to maximize their leverage for the number one overall draft pick, or to use, rather, the number one overall draft pick to max out the amount of leverage that they have at all in this offseason. And they can get help from some teams with relative interest in some of the players, obviously at the top of the draft. And they could also be hurt by a couple of things that could go down in free agency, which is, of course, much closer than the actual NFL draft. So we're going to talk about how the Titans are getting help from the Browns and how the Titans might be hurt by the Giants throughout the course of this evening's show. We got a little bit of rising and falling for you at the end of the broadcast as well. We always appreciate when you guys stop on by and get involved, which is obviously a big part of the show. We appreciate your participation. Now, it says Arden Key. I don't know if it's the real Arden Key or not, but he says Omnibuck. Well, we're everywhere. We try to be. We try to keep up with as much as humanly possible so that we can provide you guys insights and analysis all day long on your favorite football team. So we will dive into how they could be helped or how they could be hurt by a couple of teams picking around them in the NFL draft order. We'll see if my voice holds up tonight. We're feeling pretty good, feeling pretty strong at the start of the show. I don't know how this is going to play out, but we will work our way through as best we can and talk about how the Titans are in position to draft the quarterback at the top of the draft, the best quarterback at the top of the draft, or how they could slow play this thing a little bit at this point in time. Halo asked me how I feel about DK Metcalf. He's not as good as A.J. Brown, but I'd take him. I saw Mina Kimes tweet. She, of course, is a famous Seahawks fan doing NFL Live for ESPN. And she said she fell to her knees in the middle of a CVS after she saw that DK Metcalf requested a trade and that the Seahawks had agreed to trade DK Metcalf away from Seattle this offseason, or at least agreed to find a trade partner at this point. Nolan says, is there even a chance that we get DK? I mean, sure, there's always a chance, but I wouldn't put a high percentage on it. I think your days of signing or trading for headline-grabbing free agents or players under this administration, at the very least, I'm pretty sure that's done. I don't think that that's the business that they're going to be in. They're trying to find their own DK Metcalf, Trey Smith, Nick Bolton, some of the other players that I know. You got Sam Darnold even. They're trying to find their own homegrown stars, and it's not a perfect path forward that they have to be able to do it, but they do have some tools at their disposal, which would allow them to at least kickstart that process. And that's what we're here to dive into tonight. So we will work our way through. As is the custom, we need you guys to share the show, as always, as well. If you're hanging out on Twitter, please retweet the show in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you're on Facebook Live, you can share not a public. That's in the bottom left. And if you're on YouTube or Twitch, throw us a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel while you're there. We always appreciate your participation, both in commenting on the show and sharing the show around. And so we will wait for more of you guys to trickle in, or rather we'll start the show while more of you guys trickle in, and we will look forward to having you guys involved as always, even if it's taking shots at the mustache. Mike Rising is back, as opposed to, is that like the fake Mike Vrabel? Mike Rising, Buck Vrabel, however you want to do it. I just like the stash. I think it's a pretty good look. But we will avoid, or we will work our way through the mustache jokes as well as the Titans analysis tonight. Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time from the Zen Sports Studios. I'm your host, Buck Rising, and I'm proud as always to be presented to you by the wonderful people at TrueMan Fitness in the Gulch, where you go for your first workout free. As a Middle Tennessee resident, no workout ever recycled or repeated at TrueManFitness.com. By Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer. It's truck month right now at Two Rivers Ford, so you can go check out all their great options online at TwoRiversFord.com. By Bart Durham Injury Law, you deserve to be paid. Yes, you, if you've been in an automobile accident, then Bart Durham Injury Law can put you in position to succeed. And of course, by the aforementioned Zen Sports, up to $100 on your no danger first wager. using the promo code that you see behind me, ATOZTN. Titans are in a unique position in a pretty different offseason where the free agent crop, not very good, where the draft class, not great at quarterback, but great in a couple of different areas that they need to fill out some needs. Offensive line, defensive front, edge players in particular. This is a draft class that aligns well in that direction. But obviously, if you have the number one overall pick, you'd like to have a resolution at the quarterback. They'll have some resolution at quarterback, whether it's short term or long term, and obviously the next week leading up to free agency. When does free agency begin? I've got it. March the 12th, the 2025 league year begins, and players will be able to start to sign with teams once the free agency period begins at 4 p.m. or rather 3 p.m. Central Time on March the 12th. So we're not that far away, and we will start to have some of the answers to these questions. But in the meantime, you're sitting there with the number one overall pick and you're thinking, okay, how can I max out the level of interest in the number one overall pick? How can I put myself, if I'm Mike Borgonzi or Chad Brinker, the front office will say, how can I maximize my leverage here with this number one overall pick, understanding that I'm probably not going to get what the Chicago Bears got in the Carolina Panthers-Bears trade going back a couple of years ago that got Carolina Bryce Young. I'm not going to be able to put myself in quite that position, but I will be able to get some assets. It's just a question of whether or not the deal is good enough that it would preclude me from drafting the quarterback, the best quarterback in this draft class, which we all know to be Cam Ward. Joey Parkhurst says, I'm so sick of hearing the quarterbacks aren't great, yet every team wants to move up to draft Ward, only the Titans. Well, it's not, I don't really get that comment, because not every team wants to move up to draft Ward. Really, the only team that we've heard has the most real interest is the New York Giants. That's one team. There's 30 other teams. I mean, obviously other teams have quarterback resolution. So I know you're being a bit hyperbolic there when you say every team wants to move up to draft Ward, when that's simply not true. And I would argue that, there's probably not 5 teams in the NFL that want to move up to number one, what it would cost to get to number one, to draft Cam Ward, even though I think I'd be okay. I would be okay with Cam Ward going to the Titans with the number one overall pick. My preference still is to trade out because they got 1,000,001 needs. And the best way to maximize that, or the best way to capitalize on that, is to trade out of this year's draft pick and find a quarterback solution once you've built a better team for that quarterback to come into. Because no quarterback in 2025 is going to succeed at a meaningfully high level with the team is currently constructed. Free agency could help fill in some gaps there. Like we said, they have a draft yet to do. So potentially we could feel a little different about what the Titans look like. But I'm assuming, and I know they aren't assuming, but they are preparing for another year where they're towards the bottom of the barrel. Like, they are prepared. They're not orchestrating their plan with a mandate that says you got to win this year. Now, Brian Callahan has to show more evidence that he's capable of putting together a winning football product and coaching a team that looks like it's closer to winning, right? He's in the most jeopardy here. But Mike Borgonzi doesn't have that baggage attached to him. He doesn't have 3-14 on his resume, right? I mean, he might, because he was with the Chiefs at the very start, but he doesn't have the black mark that was last season tied to him. So it's more important for Callahan to win than it is anybody else in this organization this year. And it doesn't mean that winning's not the ultimate goal. They're just not really expecting to do very much of it in 2025. And I think that's kind of the place where Titans fans should set their baseline expectations, that they're not getting after it in 2025. They're not preparing to get after it in 2025. They're slow burning this thing to the point where they can be meaningfully competitive next year, be closer in games instead of getting blown out by double digits on a regular basis. How many games did they lose by 10-plus points last year? 10 or more points. At least 7 that I can think of off the top of my head, which is half of the losses that they had. And that's unacceptable in a league that's built specifically for parity. So as we move forward through this, it's also worth paying attention to the teams picking around the Titans at number 1 overall, which right now are the Browns at 2 and the Giants at 3. The Browns at 2 and the Giants at 3. I know I screwed up my hand signals there, but you get it. So all of these things will play into how they go about their business. Free agency, of course, is the next touch point for us to have more information about how this team ultimately might feel about building their roster in 2025. So the place that I want to start on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. I thought we were going to get further into the show before my voice started to fade, but it seems that it's already happening. So we'll pick up the speed a little bit. We'll pick up the pace. Which team can help the Titans gain interest in the number 1 overall pick this offseason? Which team immediately comes to mind that can help the Titans' amount of leverage that they have at this point? We will get into this together on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch. Right after I remind you that, of course, your Two Rivers Ford Take is made possible by the South's most trusted Ford dealer. That's Two Rivers Ford. Quality American-made Ford vehicles and award-winning customer service is what they offer. Go to Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet or online at tworiversford.com. It's trunk month right now. They got over 200 F-150s on the lot, and they always offer you the best pricing and best financing. Go to Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet or online at tworiversford.com for more information. Okay, so which team do you believe can help drive the Titans' interest the most in the number 1 overall pick? Dewan says the Raiders at 6. So I would not, they could be a part of this because they could be interested in Cam Ward or Shador Sanders. They're picking right now at 6. Obviously, they have a quarterback need. They're going to have a significant quarterback change in 2025 because you saw today that they released Gardner Minshew. But Max Crosby is recruiting Aaron Rodgers to the Las Vegas Raiders, which wouldn't necessarily stop them from drafting a quarterback in the first round because obviously Rodgers will be 41 next season. I don't think that the Raiders, it doesn't appear, at least, based on the information that's available right now, that the Raiders are so desperate to come up and pay what it would cost to come up to draft Cam Ward or Shador Sanders. Right now, that information isn't out there. I think it's just a bit of wishful thinking from Titans fans because, yes, the price to come up from 6 to 1 would be significantly greater than if you were trading with the Giants, for example, who would only be coming up from 3 to 1 if they were interested in Cam Ward. So we're looking at this and saying Raiders could play a role here, but they don't offer the Titans the most amount of benefit in leveraging that number 1 overall pick. Nolan Sanders says the Giants, and the Giants are the team that's most interested in number 1 overall, but they don't necessarily help the Titans leverage. In fact, I think the Giants could honestly do more to hurt the Titans' value in the number 1 overall pick than they could to help it. Because as far as we know right now, the Giants are the only ones really engaging with the Titans for that number 1 overall draft pick. There will be other teams that call, and there have been other teams that call or have called with interest. But if it's just the Giants, and the Giants know that they're negotiating against themselves, then they're probably not going to leverage their position because they know that there's not a ton of teams who are interested in coming up to number 1 overall this year. Again, there will be teams that are interested, but how many teams are actually willing to pay what it should cost to get to number 1 overall? The Giants negotiating against themselves is not going to benefit the Titans. What would benefit the Titans is if the Browns, like Shador Sanders, and there's information out there, there's reporting out there to indicate that that might in fact be the case. So if the Browns have legit interest in Shador Sanders, who there's a mix of opinions on, then that, of course, would benefit the Titans the most. we will let you hear some insights from Jordan Schultz of Fox Sports, who was on Max Crosby's podcast talking about Shador Sanders here in just a second, right after I remind you that the Primetime program is made possible by the Ashton Real Estate Group of RE/MAX Advantage. GaryAshton.com is where you go for your dream address without the stress. The intel edge you need to succeed can be found at GaryAshton.com. All right, I'm going to shut up with this squeaky voice and let Jordan Schultz talk to you about Shador Sanders.
He thinks the game at a really high clip. I don't have anything bad to say, because when I talk to teams in Indy, yes, people were like, we wish we could have seen him throw. For sure. It would have been nice to see him throw. The same with Cam. They'll have the opportunity at the pro day. But in terms of the person, and I know that's been the report, the attack on his character, I think I read that people were saying Shador Sanders didn't really care what kind of impression he made on certain teams. I haven't heard any of that. And Max, I would have heard that. I was immersed in that shit all week and asking people about, and I did hear that about some players, without question. But Shador was not one of them. And that's super telling to me, because at that position, you can really impact a guy's stock by coming out and saying, like, he's got character issues, he's a malcontent, whatever you want to say. And I didn't hear any of that. And I haven't heard any of that going back to Jackson State.
We're talking a lot about the quarterback side and
So that is Jordan Schultz, Fox Sports NFL insider, kind of refuting some of the stuff that's out there about Shador. Coming out of the combine, you had some people of prominence, specifically Todd McShay, I think, was one of the loudest voices on this, saying that he heard from a couple of personnel evaluators that Shador did not interview well throughout the course of the process, which is surprising because Shador is the most polished, the most media savvy, because he's been around it in his entire life. His family requires that he have a level of savvy about this, of any of these players. And it doesn't mean that you have to interview well with every team. C.J. Stroud didn't have a good interview with the Texans, who ended up drafting C.J. Stroud with the second overall pick. Of course, that was the Houston Texans in 2023. So those things can be used. The media has been and can be used to help tank a player's draft stock if you feel like, all right, we may not be in the Shador Sanders business based on where we're picking. So let's get it out there. And maybe they didn't have a good interaction with Shador. Again, these things could absolutely be true, but there's no question having it out there, putting it out there in the media doesn't help Shador Sanders. So one, is that a genuine interaction that people are being told about? And two, is it being done disingenuously with a means of tanking Shador Sanders draft stock? Or is it truly an interaction that that player had with that team that informs how Shador or where Shador might ultimately be drafted? But there is reporting on Shador Sanders and the Cleveland Browns that would indicate they're interested in him. And we have, of course, the clip from Adam Schefter on his own podcast talking, last week, 2 weeks ago, about the idea that he feels the most confident in the Browns taking a quarterback at number 2. Which quarterback? That remains to be seen. But Zach Rosenblatt, who covers the Jets for The Athletic and also helps contribute to their NFL reporting at large, put this into a report this week. Quote, the rumblings out of Indianapolis were that the Browns preferred Cam Ward and perhaps aren't high enough on Shador to pick him second overall. That might be a smokescreen, but Sanders isn't widely considered the caliber of prospect anyway. Ward was not mentioned really in Rosenblatt's Browns rundown, as that seems to be, he seems to have the Tennessee Titans trending in the direction of taking Cam Ward with the number 1 overall pick. So then that makes the conversation more about Shador, but there are also some rumblings out there that indicate that the Browns might be interested in Shador, including Adam Schefter's educated guess that he feels confident that the Browns might be interested in taking a quarterback at number 2. Doesn't say which quarterback. Obviously, if Cam Ward fell to 2, I think the Browns would be interested at this point in time. But we will see how this ends up playing out. So MB says, didn't interview well, way too open-ended, and that's true. It doesn't provide specifics other than they said he brought a degree of casualness or McShay to hear it. Honestly, I wish I had thought to have Bert pull that, but we're a little far into the show at this point right now, because I think it would be interesting to hear specifically what Todd cited, but he's citing a level of casualness that Shador brought to some of the interviews that didn't give off the most professional approach. Now, at the end of the day, what one person's definition of professional is doesn't have to apply to everybody. And there are some teams that are going to feel a certain type of way about quarterbacks and any athlete that has brashness or confidence that could be construed as arrogance to their personality. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I don't think Shador, I would be surprised if Shador fell out of the first round. I don't think he's a top 10 pick. He probably will end up being a top 10 pick. But when you talk to a lot of talent evaluators about this specific draft, they have a hard time coming up with more than 10 first-round grades on these players. And obviously there's 32 picks in the first round. And, in any given year, you might have 15 to maybe 20 in a good draft where you have legit first-round grades on 20 players or 15 players. This year is not the case. Doesn't mean, as we always preface these conversations, by saying that these players can't go on to have successful NFL careers, but it's being viewed and being talked about in a way where, you're probably going to overdraft Shador, for example, if you need a quarterback and you take him in the first round, first and foremost. So we will, Major Key says, I heard a guy say to PK, he's not a shirt and tie tucked in type of guy. Shit was racist as hell. I'm not familiar with maybe PK had something on his podcast or said something on a radio appearance that I haven't heard. That is definitely some coded language, right? So you have to also keep that in mind when you're talking about two young, black, brash quarterbacks at the top of the draft. I know people like to say that racial undertones in these things don't matter, but they do. And I think that, some people would prefer to not have to pay attention to that. But there's no question that right, wrong, or indifferent, that it is a part of the dialogue around these two players. And you have to be conscious of how people talk about these two players, given that fact. Is it arrogance or is it confidence, right? Those are the kind of things, those are the kind of differentiating factors that you have to keep in mind. Coded language, says Curtis. Yeah, absolutely. It's, people will tell on themselves with the way that they talk about these players in particular. And I think for the most part, you guys are discerning enough to figure out, all right, who's dog whistling themselves a little bit on this stuff and who's genuinely trying to provide analysis and insights on who these players are and how teams might view them. But this stuff goes on in the NFL with teams and people that work in front offices too. And, you wish that wasn't the case, but it does play a role. How big that role is, I'll leave that for other people to decide. Ryan Field says it's dark for quarterback or bust, best in the class. Well, that's stupid. Of course, that's not true. But, I wonder how big the gulf is between Shador and Dart versus Cam and Shador. I think there's a significantly bigger gap based on, again, just talking to people who are smarter than this about me. It's a bigger gap between Cam and Shador Sanders than there might be Shador Sanders and Jackson Dart. Kind of where we're at with this right now. So I think the Browns can help them the most. Now let's talk about the team that could hurt them the most in terms of the leverage that they have for the number one overall draft pick. And we will do that right after you guys can submit who you think the team that could hurt them the most in their pursuit of trading out. And I do believe, again, their preference is to trade out of the number one overall pick. They haven't expressed that thought publicly, but you talk to enough people privately that there is definitely a sense that the Titans would prefer to have more draft capital than they currently do and would prefer to have more opportunities, more swings at this thing that the number one overall pick could provide to them. So which team could hurt their leverage? We'll discuss right after I remind you that the Primetime Show is made possible by Bart Durham Injury Law, because you deserve to be paid. And Blair Durham and his team will help maximize your leverage, speaking of leverage, and get you the results that you deserve. They have their case results that are available for you to review online at bartdurham.com. They also have their areas of practice where you can learn more about how they can help you, and you can get a free consultation online right now at bartdurham.com, because you deserve to be paid. All right, so as we look at the teams around the Titans who could hurt their leverage here, Fraser Kirkpatrick says Cleveland. So I guess what's the argument for Cleveland hurting them as opposed to helping them? Because if Cleveland, for example, picking second overall, doesn't go the route of quarterback, say they take Abdul Carter, the best player in the draft. Well, does that hurt the Titans' leverage from number one overall? To an extent, right? Because it would mean that the Giants would have a quarterback able to fall to them, Shador, theoretically. I'm operating under the assumption that there's no world in which Shador Sanders goes before his pick before Cam Ward. Maybe that's foolish by me, but I think that's a fair assumption. It's a risk I'm willing to take at this point in time. So if Abdul Carter goes 2 and Shador is available at 3, well, that might hurt the Titans' leverage. Or if the Titans trade back to 3 after doing a deal with the Titans, or after doing a deal with the Giants because the Giants want Cam Ward, Titans still have a need at quarterback. Is Shador Sanders worth a 3rd overall pick? I don't think that has the most, that could cause the most amount of problems for the Tennessee Titans, the Browns in particular. I think the Giants, because of what I mentioned earlier, they're really negotiating against themselves right now for the number one overall draft pick. And I think they're pretty aware of that. But also, as Adam Schefter points out, Sam Darnold could go back to Minnesota. Sam Darnold could also sign with the New York Giants. And that's something that Adam Schefter kind of discussed on his podcast earlier this week.
Stafford was the first domino to fall for the quarterback market. Whatever happened with him was going to kind of dictate everything else that happened. With him going back to the Rams, where are we currently at with the quarterback carousel?
Well, that was the big domino. And the flag bearer now, the ring bearer now, is Sam Darnold next. Now, as we tape this Tuesday morning early, 8:30 or so a.m., the Vikings are not expected to tag Sam Darnold. And it would not be surprising if the two sides figured out some type of short-term contract that enabled the Vikings to get Sam Darnold, that enabled him to get paid, that enabled them to run it back in the event that J.J. McCarthy is not fully ready this season from his knee injury, or struggles in the preseason, or experiences whatever type of setback there is. So, to me, Sam Darnold to Minnesota makes sense, but now that he's not going to be tagged, other teams are going to have their say. So we'll see if there's a team out there, like the New York Giants, that makes a compelling enough offer to pry loose Sam Darnold. My guess as we tape this is no. My guess is the one that makes the most sense is Minnesota. It's not exactly what Sam Darnold would have hoped for or wanted, but it's still a pretty favorable outcome in my mind.
So that's obviously, based on that final graphic, the Adam Schefter podcast and him talking about potentially Sam Darnold returning to Minnesota. But if he doesn't, New York could absolutely be in play there. That's a better option for Brian Daboll, and Joe Shane, who are in way more of a desperation mode to win. You've got that domino impacting the Titans, because if the Giants were to pay Sam Darnold, well, then, yeah, that would take the team that's most desperate to come up for the number one overall pick out of the running. That would nuke your leverage immediately out of the gate. I think that there is something that you have to keep in mind about Sam Darnold. I talked to a bunch of people with a handful of different teams last week in Indianapolis. And one of the things that I heard from an NFC scout is that they would be shocked if Sam Darnold got anywhere close to 40. I think the expectation league-wide is that Sam Darnold is going to come in closer to $30 million a year on an average annual basis, which, again, is not what he's after. But if that ends up holding true, say if the Titans were to get into the Sam Darnold bidding, or who else might want Sam Darnold? The Giants. And either team offered him closer to 30 than they did to 40. Might Sam Darnold look around and be like, well, if I'm not going to make, if I'm going to make $10 million a year less than I thought I was going to make, which is not inconsequential money. I know probably most of you are shrugging your shoulders and say, well, I'd love 30 million, even if it means I can't get 40 million, because $30 million a year would be great. Sure. But you're not an NFL quarterback. So let's think the way that they would think, or think the way that their representation might think. Might I be more interested, if I was Sam Darnold, in going back to Minnesota for less money and a shorter deal, with the opportunity to earn more money in the future if things go well, continue to go well in Minnesota? That is the thing to me that makes the most sense. Because if I was Sam Darnold, obviously money matters, no state income tax matters, but let's say the Titans legit try to get in on the Sam Darnold thing. And I will tell you right now, I would be very surprised. It would not surprise me if Brian Callahan was more interested in Sam Darnold than the front office was, because Brian Callahan needs more desperately to win this year than the front office does. But if I'm Sam Darnold and the Titans get in on the Sam Darnold game and they give him a similar offer or make a similar offer, then Minnesota, who's probably going to come in lower because they got a better team, they got a better situation for Sam Darnold. If I was Sam Darnold, I'd look around and be like, well, why do I want to go to Tennessee and put myself in a worse position for not that big a difference in money when I could go to Minnesota, play for a better team, and potentially increase my value, give myself a better percentage chance to increase my value at this point? I mean, that's how I would think about it. I don't know Sam Darnold. I don't know what goes on in his head. But it would make a lot of sense if I was a player and getting similar offers from bad teams versus the team that I know to be good and who I've won with, that I wouldn't just go back to the other team that I've won with and be like, all right, guys, my bad. I'll take 30, I'll 35, maybe 30. Maybe we can talk about 30. That's how I think this has the potential to go down. I certainly don't think the Titans are going to be in the Sam Darnold long-term contract business. That much I can almost definitively tell you. All right, so a little bit of rising and falling. Whose stock rose? Whose stock fell this week in sports? Let's talk about it together right after I remind you that the Primetime program is made possible by the wonderful folks at TrueMath Fitness in the Gulch. Your first workout is free as a Middle Tennessee resident. No workout ever recycled or repeated. TrueMath Fitness is there to maximize your ability to achieve your fitness goals with group classes, personal training, a membership that allows you access to their open gym whenever you please. TrueMathFitness.com for more information. All right. Whose stock rose? Whose stock fell? Bert, we got a little goldfish racing. What is this?
Well, I'm here to tell you that rules have ruined a lot of great American institutions. No steroids in baseball. You can't knock the shit out of anybody in football anymore. They don't show lingerie football on Spike anymore. Rules have ruined a lot of institutions. And the same thing is happening in Florida at a sport that happens in bars. Imagine if they told you you can't use darts anymore. We're going to replace darts with suction cups. Imagine if they told you you can't use pool cues anymore. You're going to have to punch the ball into that pocket. Imagine if they told you you're not allowed to blow a goldfish anymore.
Matt Baker here in Pacific Beach. We are here at the Shore Club to see the very controversial goldfish races. Apparently, PETA types have been out here protesting and telling them that they need to shut them down. They say, stop blowing goldfish. The news crews are here, And the protesters are standing by. The goldfish are about to be blown any minute now. I can feel it. The air is getting thick. The tension is building. What will happen tonight? Will the fish get blown? Will the protesters stop this evil thing from happening? We're here with Justice, the man who went viral, actually bringing attention to this situation. Now, how do you feel? Like, apparently you've been getting death threats. Is that right?
Yeah, we've been getting death threats. Organizations been getting death threats. We're just trying to speak up for animals, and people think it's goofy, but yeah, that's all we're trying to do is just advocate for animal rights, animal welfare.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely making a big splash, right? Isn't that the essence of a good protest? Is getting some eyes on it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So technically.
Ooh, I'm jealous. Dang, go to the Florida club. So, okay, obviously it's a little ambiguous, and somebody's like, I didn't even know Goldfish had wieners. Well, they're not really doing that. I can't play you the actual video because there's music on it, so I had to mute it. But if you look here, get this dadgum overlay out the way. So what happens is they put a goldfish in one end of this aquarium.
Oh, that one on the left looks like for sure she could blow a goldfish.
Well, she's going to try to do it through a straw. And so what they do is they put the goldfish on one end of the aquarium, and you try to blow air behind it to get your goldfish to the other end first. Obviously, when you do that, you get very excited and flick people off. PETA has taken an issue with this. PETA has decided that, this is terrible for goldfish. Goldfish don't enjoy this. No one likes getting blown. Come on now. So people use goldfish as fishing bait. People use goldfish. Have you ever seen Finding Nemo?
Yes.
You know that girl that comes to the dentist office and is like, if you think living with that girl is worse than getting blown in a bar, then you are insane. Also, I would be the champion goldfish blower. They would have a golden fish for me to wear in on my noggin every day. This is the dude doing the interview. I guess he decided he was not going to be an advocate anymore. He was also going to blow a fish. It looks like he's used straws in bars before too, though. So from my end, PETA, you know what PETA stands for in the South, at least in North Carolina?
What?
People eating tasty animals. I don't want to eat those fish. I want to fight for their right to be blown. So, PETA, you leave those fish alone. Stay out of our bars. Stay out of our schools. Stay out of our churches. We'll do what the hell we want to with our fish. I went to PetSmart. I bought it. You can't tell me what to do.
Somebody said this is pretty much cockfighting. Not.
You're not putting the equivalent of
beta fish.
Yes, the beta fish. You were, and we did that too. I remember one time buying a UFC pay-per-view, and we were like, okay, we're going to watch grown men fight. We're going to watch fish fight. We put the two betas in the same bowl. They didn't even fight. So I don't know where this got. Chamber in the sec chamber. So
nothing makes me laugh more than when you slow read a comment and it brings you to a screeching halt while you're talking. It's why I enjoy throwing them up on the screen for you.
Why? What's that last word?
Why is Bert always shirtless?
Because then I get to show these off. What a rush.
I don't know what we just did there, and there's a bar in the middle of my face.
That's what the goldfish were saying.
Get out. But I guess goldfish races at the, the beach club or Palm Shore Club or whatever the hell. Either way, the goldfish races stock down, unfortunately. Brandon Tyler says 37 up, 37U football and goldfish blowing. I need all of it. Yeah, I mean, we're just trying to have good, healthy competition. I struggle with, I will say this, I am more pro PETA than I'm not, right? But goldfish, it's tough for me to kind of get behind that movement. I would think that there are much more worthy animal rights protests than the goldfish races. I don't know. The goldfish, Goldfish die from floating around in a bowl anyway. I just, it seems a bit of a stretch to me. All right, that's going to do it for us tonight here on the Primetime program. We have a loaded show tomorrow. We got Titans president and CEO Burke Nihill in studio. We're going to talk to him about, he's been empowered to speak on behalf of maybe Adam Strunk. So if we're not going to get to interview ownership, we might as well get the opportunity to interview the people who are empowered to speak on behalf of ownership. And we will look forward to doing that with Burke Nihill tomorrow. We also have Adam Sparks because spring ball starts of the Knoxville News Sentinel. So we'll get you your Vols fix. It's been a while since we talked about the University of Tennessee. And Henry Anderson, the longtime NFL defensive lineman, is going to join us to talk some ball and also a business venture that he is getting involved in that you might want to hear more about. So we'll look forward to having you guys from 10 to 1 on 104.5 The Zone tomorrow. Perhaps there will be more sec chamber jokes. Perhaps there will be goldfish races. Who's to say? Show up and find out.